everybody. My dad thinks his podcast is amazing, so please subscribe, give it 5 stars or whatever, and maybe he'll finally stop talking about it. Anyways, welcome to Sobriety.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Ryan. This is Jess. We are sober as fuck. Before we get to today's guest, which I'm very excited about, I do want to remind everybody to please like, share, and subscribe. Mainly share our podcast on all platforms. We're on Apple, Spotify podcast, and also YouTube.
So before we get further into it, trigger warning. We do talk about a lot of sensitive issues, obviously alcoholism, addiction, substance abuse. We also talk about eating disorders, self-harm, grief, anything that is triggering emotionally. We likely discuss it on this podcast. So prioritize your own mental health. And if you start feeling some way, please log off. We'll always be here. But assuming that you stick around, like Ryan said, make sure that you are sharing and commenting and liking, subscribing, all of the things, all the action words. You can also find our podcast on our website.
Yep.
It is our-noon.com. We have resources, we have a blog, and soon coaching. That's going to start very, very soon. So check that out. And we put a lot of work into it. I'm very proud of it.
You have put a lot of work into it.
You're right.
Good job.
I have put a lot of work into it. I have birthed it from my body.
There you go.
Created life.
Who's on the podcast?
So today we do have a very special guest. Her name is Marissa Cherepanov, and she is a big female leader and a champion for sobriety and women and all of the things. She is a mom, and she's just an amazing human being, and I can't wait to hear her full story. So let's go ahead and
been waiting for this one. Hey, Marissa, how are you?
Hi, guys. Hello. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm very excited.
We are too.
And thanks for being flexible with my schedule.
No problem. We have to be that way too sometimes, so we completely understand.
Absolutely.
So before we get into your sobriety story, tell us a little bit about No Girl Left Behind. You're obviously the creator, the CEO of it. So if you could give us a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't take full credit for creating it. A lovely woman named Kiki Rosema, who lives in Canada, she created it. It actually started as a passion project, and it was like a weekend summer camp thing she created for girls. And it got too big. And so she thought, okay, instead of a weekend overnight camp, let's do one-day events, and we can do multiple, and then more people can attend. And shortly after its inception, she found me. But it's a phenomenal female empowerment event. And so we travel to various cities in North America. It's usually 6 or 7 hours long. And it's open to all women, any age. They just have to be over 9 years old. We take the girls that are age 9 to 15 and put them through youth workshops, like empowerment, self-confidence, hands-on tools. And then the women 16 to, I always say 100, but you could be 101 if you wanted. They go into our adult sessions. And there's 4 of us that travel to every event. We call ourselves the empowerment team. And then we do recruit local regional women in the area just to help, drive and promote. And we are 2 days away from our first event in the United States. So it has been a week, let me tell you. But yeah, it's definitely become my passion project. So I launched the American chapter. So I am the executive director of No Girl Left Behind Event, Inc. here in America. And I've been running the American chapter. And then I do travel back and forth to help facilitate the Canadian ones. So it's been almost to the day a year. I was just looking at my calendar, and tomorrow marks a year that I've been going to these local networking meetings on behalf of No Girl Left Behind every Friday for 2 hours. So I've been putting in the time, but it's growing and it's changing lives. And I definitely say it's a passion project, because anytime you're doing a nonprofit, the people in the nonprofit world can attest that, it's a lot of volunteering and it's a lot of your time. But for me, it's a happy investment, because it makes me feel like I'm thriving. And again, it really helps me stay sober because I'm so busy. And it's really fun for me. So yeah, that's No Girl Left Behind.
That's
awesome.
fantastic. I come from the nonprofit world. I worked in nonprofit healthcare for about 13 years.
Oh, wow.
And you're right. Like, it takes a special kind of person, because it's a lot of work and volunteering and time and little to no pay.
Yeah.
So you have to be the person who is really all in. I used to joke with him when I
Passionate.
first met him, because he had like a super steady career and I was still working in nonprofit. And I thought, as a single person, I was like, I'm going to do this forever. I'm never going to make a lot of money, but if it's just me, I don't need a lot of money. Right.
Mhm.
And he had this big career. When we started really like getting hot and heavy, especially engaged, I'm like, thank goodness you make a big boy salary, because I am just never going to make money. But you love it, it's worth it when you see these lives, and these, in your situation, girls, or in mine, patients, and you're really able to touch them and help them. And it's a very, very, very fulfilling job, is what I'll say, or work that you do.
Yeah, I do have a day job. I mean, I've been in retail fashion leadership for almost 20 years. So on Monday I'll go back to work, but I definitely work 7 days a week, probably 12 hours a day or something.
Yeah.
I always joke that once all the kids are in bed, it's when I pop open the laptop and do the nonprofit stuff, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
And
So,
I have sobriety to thank for it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about next. Was you're about 2.5 years into your sobriety journey. What was it that changed your relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, I had known for years, probably like 10 years in my mind, that I would be sober one day. I just couldn't get over the hump. And it wasn't until January 7th is my sober date. And I'd had a conversation with my oldest child just about life and the pressures of life. And we never once brought up drinking, but the main feedback was they didn't like being at home. And as a parent, that hurt. And I remember in that moment, I talk a lot about how I almost had like a flash of a foresight. It was like I could see my kids 10 years down the road if I was sober, and I could see them 10 years down the road if I wasn't. And in that moment, in that flash of the future, I was like, I know exactly what I need to do. And I knew that if I just cut alcohol out of my life and became a different person, they would want to be at home. And it worked. I'd say 6 to 12 months into sobriety, the entire family was thriving. The kids were different. Our whole dynamic had changed, where the kids would rather be at home playing board games with me than out hanging out with their friends, where when I was drinking, they would rather be anywhere but home, probably because I was drinking. They wouldn't say that, but I knew in my heart and my gut. So that's why there's that meme of Rob Lowe where he says, or a video or reel or whatever, like, no one can quit for anyone but themselves. And I just completely disagree with that, just from my own personal experience. I think it depends on your personal situation. It's different for everyone. Some people can't quit for anyone but themselves. But for me, I couldn't quit for myself. I was incapable of quitting for myself. But when it became my kids, health and, their lives, that's what finally made it click for me, was that I could completely transform these 4 humans' lives if I just took that drink out of my hand. Right. And it sounds so minimal, like it's just a drink in your hand, but it's life changing. I mean, it changed all of our lives. They're completely different people. I'd say a couple months in, it became a personal mission. Like I started to feel different, and I thought, I'm doing this for me and them. But that initial light switch in my head, like that made me do that. I remember it was crazy because it was on January 7th is Russian Christmas, which is a huge celebratory day. And I'd probably been drinking that day, but I don't think I was completely wasted. I don't think I went anywhere that year. Generally, there was functions and stuff, but that year I think I stayed home. And I remember walking out of my child's bedroom and saying to my husband, I am never drinking again. Never, ever. It's going to change their lives. And I'm making the choice today. And I went out the next day and bought a ton of drinks that were non-alcoholic. And I always joke, I bought a bunch of adult coloring books because I knew I needed to keep my hands and my mind busy, because my routine literally was sometimes to just drink before I even got home, and then just start drinking the second I got home until I went to sleep. And that was for years. And so I knew that if I had like a seltzer or a kombucha that I could pop open in place of that, and my other hand would be drawing, I only needed that for, I think it was like maybe 6-7 weeks or so. I don't remember the exact, but I finished a couple of art projects. I painted my backyard fence. I mean, I really leaned heavily into art. I've always been into art, but I leaned severely heavily into art when I was trying to get sober. And now, I don't need it at all. But in those first few days, weeks, that was my saving grace, because I never did AA or a program. I never had anyone going sober with me. It was just like, I'm doing this 100%. And I know how I need to do it. I need to go buy some coloring books and some kombucha. and that's what I did. Yeah. And I often say my life changed so much. So many opportunities came in front of me. I would have never met the founder of No Girl Left Behind had I not been sober. And I can tell you that story right now, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I tend to talk a lot. I blab.
Please do.
But I travel for work sometimes, and I go through like leadership trainings. And so I happened to be, it was, in the very beginning of my sobriety, I think like maybe just a few months in, and I was in Seattle. They put me up in a studio for a week-long leadership training session for my day job. And normally when I travel for work, on the airplane, you drink before you get on the airplane, you drink when you get off, you drink after work. So I remember getting off that first day of work, and there was a pub generally like right across the street, like 2 seconds. And I'm sitting in this studio thinking I could just walk over there. Like, what would it hurt? And I thought, no, I need to find something to do instead. And I had been on a weight loss journey with a company called Colon Broom. It's a psyllium husk shake. I actually lost 80 pounds in 8 months using it.
Oh, wow.
And I figured, I'll shoot my shot. I'll stay up late instead of going to the pub, and I'll send them an email asking to be like their spokesperson. And initially they just said, like, leave us alone. We don't care. But I kept emailing them after that first night in Seattle. And eventually I came on board as their main spokesperson. So they put me in ads and commercials, and I don't even know where I was in Europe because they're based out of Europe, but I did sign the rights over to my voice and my message. And they put me in so many ads that the founder of No Girl Left Behind, she had recently been curious about Colon Broom, and she saw me in one of their ads and found me on Instagram and DM'd me, and originally wanted me to be just a part of the event. But I always joke, had I not been sober that night in Seattle and pitched to that weight loss company, I never would have been in an ad, and she would have never found me. And I wouldn't even be a part of No Girl Left Behind today. So I literally have sobriety to thank for all of the little stepping stones that got me where I am today. And after her and I spoke, and she figured out what I've done for a living for the last 20 years, which is, run large teams and sales and brand awareness and brand marketing and customer penetration and ROI and all that fancy stuff, running a business. She was like, I'm looking for someone exactly like you to be my partner. And I was like, your message and everything that you're about completely aligns with my story and the things that happened to me as a child. And so, yeah, it was a blessing of crossroads in that moment. But again, had I walked across the street to the pub, I never would have pitched the weight loss company, right? So it's like that one switch in your mind of giving up alcohol opens up so many doors. I feel like doors that you're letting be closed in your face because you're in a fog and you're drunk every night, so getting into that clarity I feel like it allows the universe to just put what you need in front of you in your path, you know?
I completely agree with that. We've talked about that a couple times on the podcast too. Anyone in sobriety or any sort of mental health evolutionary journey, they'll say, I started working on myself. I started being very intentional about my actions and where I place my energy and all of the things. And opportunities showed up. They just started showing up. And you realize it sort of in retrospect too, right? So you quit drinking and you have these opportunities to meet people that maybe you wouldn't have been able to meet before. Or you quit drinking and you join an app and you meet this big community and we start a podcast. And I think people really underestimate, and when I say people who are not necessarily in the sober or recovery community, that it's all about being intentional of where you are placing your energy, who you are surrounding yourself with, what content you are consuming, and what you're allowing into that space too. We talk a lot about boundaries, but really what those boundaries are, it's like a strain, it's a filter system of, I'm going to allow certain things in and filter certain things out. And I think science-based, like attracts like, and you put that energy out and it most certainly comes back. So that is like a common thread I hear amongst everyone. It's undeniable. And I mean, look at you, all of the young women's lives that you are changing and touching. And I'm sure that your kids see that. And we talked earlier about like the range of their ages. And it's so important for them to see that as you as a mom too, being able to overcome, something that Ryan really struggled with was, he's like, I feel like I wasted all this time and I wish I would have known these things so long ago. But if you flip the coin over, you're showing your kids that at any point in your life, you can decide to do better. You can decide to change. You can wake up and just make one small change, whether it's making your bed every day or a big change like quitting drinking. And you can always rewrite your future. And I think that is so important, to anyone that is watching you. And it's not perfect. I mean, you have to constantly be checking in with yourself and working on yourself. But yeah, I think beautiful things happen when you start becoming very intentional about where you're putting that energy. And I do like that you said that for you decided to quit drinking because of your kids. Because in my mind, I see that's still for you, right? Like your children, you did it because you wanted to be better for them. And in order to be better for them, you had to be better for yourself. What did that look like that transition? I know you kind of touched on it when you said, well, now they want to like be home and play board games, but your kids range from like 6 to 18. So I'm sure that their response to that is different depending on their age. What did that look like too?
Yeah. And it was more, I guess it was a little bit so that I could be a better mom. But at the time, in the moment of decision, it was more like they could be better adults. Like I literally could picture them at 30 years old in that moment on January 7th. And I could see like really sad, unhealthy adults, and I would have been an old lady by then. But it was like a foresight into the future and that glimpse of what they would look like when I was in my 80s, if I was drinking that whole time versus the opposite. I just knew right in that moment and it worked. But their lives have definitely, it's so funny because my older three have seen mom wasted, I'm sorry. But okay. I don't know if you can hear that. My computer's going crazy. But my youngest has never seen me drunk. I mean, she can't remember it because she was too little. She would have been like 3.5, 4 when I quit. We're in there. And we always joke she's never seen me drunk. She'll never have a memory of it, which is so crazy because the teenagers definitely had their share of seeing those party nights, and it affected them. I will say one of my middle ones, she's got anxiety, and sometimes I have super mom guilt. And, I think I kind of blame myself for that because I was in the height of my drinking when she was at a very impressionable age. The older two were older and could figure it out, but she was young. And, so I often mom guilt myself for her, but they've definitely had a complete turnaround. And I love what you said about living with intention and living through your values. In my No Girl Left Behind sessions, that's what I talk about with the girls when I do the youth session is no matter where you are in your life, you can picture your best self in your head. And if you just never give up that vision, you eventually will become that person. I mean, the same goes as if you say every day is a miserable day, you're going to have a miserable day every day, but if you're always looking for the good, even in the terrible days, it turns around so much quicker. And it's crazy because in sobriety, I can have a really, really bad day and remain positive through the whole thing and just think, I know what you're doing, universe. You're testing me. I'm going to be stronger from this. I'm going to be better from this. And it takes me literally seconds at this point to acknowledge it and go, oh, here you go. Like, the devil in your ear. Nope, don't let it in. This is just the universe testing you. Whereas when I was drinking, it would take me weeks to get to that point. I mean, I would dwell on things. I would cry and, woe is me and life is awful and probably make it worse. But, that's the fog of drinking is you just can't ever get a grasp on your reality. I feel like you're just, numbing yourself. And I love, there's a guy, I don't know his name. He has a long beard. But he's on something where he says, like, I don't do a lot of podcasts because drinking is not the problem. It's the solution. Have you heard that before? And I love that message because it's so true. It's a horrible solution, right? You're poisoning yourself, but it's the solution for those people. You're resolving something. You're trying to get away from yourself. You're uncomfortable in your own skin, and that's why you're doing it. So it's not like the drinking isn't the problem. The problem is the root of what you're running from.
Yes.
And for me, I was just so unhappy with myself. In 2020, I got laid off because of COVID. And that was when I really started drinking heavier. And then by 2022, that was the height of my rock bottom. 2022 was a bad year for me. But I also had a lot of demons from when I was a teenager that I hadn't dealt with. And I'm not sure if you guys know about all that or have read or seen any of the podcasts or anything. But
no.
I had a great childhood. My dad worked in law with the state, and my mom was a nurse. And I was in gymnastics and pageants. And looking back, I went through a lot of mental rehearsal training. My mom used to send me to different states for gymnastics training. And I did it I started at age 3 and I retired my freshman year. I actually got a national title in 1997, which was amazing. But what I took away as an adult from all those years of training was the mental rehearsal. I mean, they put you through intense. And I don't know if you guys have seen the video of the pilots, like pretending that they're flying with their eyes closed. And it just shows how intense they train mentally before they go in the air. Same thing for athletes, And what I did as a child was I would lay in bed at night when I was bored, and I would do that with life. Like I would mentally rehearse what I wanted to happen the next day at school or next year at school or what I would look like in 5 years. And I just always did that. I didn't know what I was doing because I was in like 4th grade, Like I had a crush on a boy, and I would mentally rehearse the night before what I was going to say to that boy and what he would say back, just to that dumbed down level. But so many years of mental rehearsal training, I think, is really what saved me because when I was, I think 12, a new man entered our lives. My mom had a new man, and his lot in life was to really drive a wedge between my mother and I. So he just didn't like me, and so it went from this picture perfect kind of childhood to feeling unwelcome in my own home, to the point where there was times where my mom would travel for work and I'd come home from high school and my stuff would be on the front lawn and he'd tell me, you don't live here anymore. You need to find somewhere to go. he really did not like me. And so after about 5 years of living with him, I made the decision to run away at the age of 17. And I very quickly got in very, very deep into like the criminal underworld and, sex trafficking and just the really horrible side of life. And so in summer of 2001, I was 17. And I'd been doing some pretty heavy things in that world, but I was swarmed by police and arrested. I was arrested initially for 7 felonies. When I was in the jail cell, they added attempted manslaughter to my charges because I had vials of liquid morphine on me with intent to sell. And they decided in that moment that they were going to try me as an adult because I was just a couple months away from my 18th birthday. So in a matter of like a year, I went from like gymnastics and pageants and cheerleading and a mom and a dad to being completely alone in a jail cell. I was told I was being charged with all these felonies. They did end up dropping the manslaughter and some other heavier charges, and I took a plea bargain. But in that moment in 2001, it was the writing was on the wall, and I was in a very low place. In fact, in the book that comes out today, isn't that funny? The book comes out today. What's going on? Start Over. It's the book, and I'll go into that. But I was hopeless, and so when I was released, I never did a lot of time. I had my court date, and they slapped me with the lesser charges and sent me on my way. But I just took it as, this is my life now. This is my route. This is where I'm going to go. This is, everything I did before this was for nothing. And I'm worthless is really how it felt. And so I went back into that world. I spent about 3 years in that world, roughly. And it wasn't until, and I speak about this in my book and my workshops and my coaching a lot. There's 2 times in my life where there was like a guardian angel placed in front of me. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about No Girl Left Behind, is I feel like I can be that for someone or multiple people at a time, because there's hundreds of people at the event. But one of the heavier raids that I was in, I think I was probably 19 by the time, it was a pretty bad raid, watching, and it's in the book, but watching people's faces get mauled by dogs and, just really heavy stuff. And so it was in that raid that an officer took me aside into a private room. He lined us up and then singled me out. And he said, "You don't belong here. Like, what are you doing here?" Mm-hmm. And I knew it, but I just had taken my card. That was what the universe dealt me, and I never thought there was a chance for me to have any other kind of life. But in that moment, that was the first time where I thought, he's right. I don't belong here. But I said to him, like, I don't talk to my family. I don't have anywhere to live. I've been in this life for so long. I'm a felon. I don't have any other choice. And he said, "You do." He said, if you can stay out of trouble, he looked up my record. He said, "You've got about a decade of hard work, but if you can give a decade of hard work, you could probably get your life back." And I thought he was kind of, full of BS for a minute, because I thought, there's just no way. I mean, look at me, there's no way I can get my life back. But that guardian angel, that officer, prompted me to go reach out and walk into a criminal defense law firm days later and seek out advice. And they told me the same thing. I've got about a decade of hard work, but if I could do it for a decade, I had a chance. And so I went back and I gathered up all my things, and I showed up on my father's back porch with a garbage bag over my shoulder. And I said, "I'm done. I want to come home. I need help, and I need someone to give me a couch to sleep on so I can get myself back." And he let me in his door, and I got clean, and I got a job. And for the next decade, I worked on myself and further education, a lot of waitressing and bartending to save up money. And by the time I was 22, I had gotten my own apartment and was expecting my first child, who's now going to be 19. But, I speak so much about those people in your life that cause those pivots. And I'm such a firm believer in the universe putting people in your path for a reason, because had I never been in that specific raid, and that had that officer never pulled me aside, I don't even know where I'd be today, because he was the first person that really made me think that there was a chance for me to turn my life around. And what's crazier is I was so ashamed of what I went through. I kept it so hidden for over 20 years. Not a soul would have known what I went through. Only my mom and my husband and, a couple close friends. But I didn't want anybody to know what I'd went through, because I had eventually started my career and established a pretty good career, working in C-level and boardrooms and presenting presentations to these CEOs. And so by no means was I ever going to tell anybody about my past. And it wasn't until, again, I quit drinking and I was on a sober podcast, and I accidentally said a blip about it. And I even stopped myself, because I was like, oh God, Marissa, don't tell anyone that, And I said on that podcast, I didn't really mean to say that. Can we cut it out? And everyone said, no, that's so raw. Like, you should honestly share that more. And I thought, I don't think so. Everyone has a story. What makes it special? We all have a special story. There's really nothing special about mine. It's just another story of the rags or whatever to riches or whatever, like turning your life around. I just didn't think it was very special. I just thought it was another story of a comeback. But the more people on that podcast came forward, and what did it for me was one woman came on, and this is actually what made me decide to start sharing it and eventually put it in a book, was one woman came on and said, she had just gotten out of jail. That day, her dad had picked her up from jail, and she had every intention of calling her dealer and calling her friends and going back out into that world. And her dad said, before you leave, I want you to just listen to a podcast with me. And she heard my story, and she said it completely changed the direction of what she was going to do. She said, I am not going to call my dealer. I am not going to call my friends. I'm going to stay at my dad's house, and I'm going to sleep on his couch, and I'm going to get my life back together just like you did. And in that moment, I was like, maybe I should share it, because that's only one person. But if that's just one person, that's a life changed, just by sharing it. So instead of being ashamed of it and trying to protect my own identity, I decided to just lean into humility and shame. And, the longer I was sober, the easier it got to share. And now it's been about 2 years ago that I actually started sharing it. And so now I do podcasts talking about it, but it's just so crazy, because I spent over 20 years working very hard to keep that part of my life hidden. I didn't want anyone to know that I went through that. So it's just crazy how, again, putting down the drink opens up so many doors and changes so many lives, So that's what I went through at 17. And that's pretty much part of my workshops that I share. I don't go into the nitty gritty, of course, with the youth sessions,
Right.
But I really lean into mental rehearsal, and it's more than just imagining. It's a feeling. I talk about this book called Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting by Lynn Grabhorn. And there's a chapter called The Car Analogy. And that helped me a lot in my life. It talks about how, and it's just a simple example, but like, say you have a dream car, like a Ferrari or something, and a beautiful woman pulls up next to you in that car. And as people, as women, as humans, we often lean into like envy or jealousy, and we get that gut feeling of like, screw them, like, why them, not me, and it's such a human reaction. But in that book, it talks about how if you can flip that switch in that moment and think, good for them, bravo for them, I'm happy for them, they've done something right, you're literally telling the universe that you're ready to expect those kinds of blessings in your own life. And so anytime there's something that I want really bad in life, of course I write it down, because I believe in manifestation, but I really try to lean into that feeling of already having it and being happy for people that already have it. And I think that energy and that vibration just brings those things closer to me. And like you said, Ryan,
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I didn't want to say you were so upset that you waited so long. And I felt that way for a while too. And then I thought, had I not gone through all those hardships, I wouldn't be able to speak to those people the way I do today and change lives. So I try to now be grateful for how long it took me, because I think those years are really what prepared me for what I'm doing today. Because I used to think, man, I wasted like 10 years drinking my life away. And I affected my kids probably. And I often get into that mindset too of like, I wasted some time, but I think I had to go down that dark path of alcoholism, to come through on the other side. And I think that's part of the reason I got so bad is I never dealt with those demons from when I was 17. Again, I closed it off and I pretended it never happened. So it wasn't until sobriety that I was able to really look back outside of myself and look at the things I went through. And that was how I was able to figure out how I got through it was, I actually took the time to go find my journals from when I was in those dark places that I still have. One of the excerpts is in the book, but I finally in sobriety took the time to read those journals and see what I was thinking and what I was going through. And my God, did I mental rehearse so much during those 3 years and those dark times and those operations basements and things like, I would go into my own mind and picture myself as like a 40-year-old thriving woman, even though I was, in the basement of a drug house. So, it's all those things I went through that I'm grateful for now, rather than be mad at myself.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. We actually talked about this yesterday. That that's one of the things I hear a lot in the sobriety community. Man, I wish I would have done this 10, 15 years ago. And I came to the same realization as you did, is because it's all learning stuff, or data points, as we like to call them, that you collect over the years. My biggest thing was, I felt really bad of what I was showing my kids, that alcohol solves problems, when really it's just creating them, right?
Yeah.
And with, now that I got sober, I finally decided to see a therapist, which is something I would have never done before, which has also brought out a lot of things from my younger life that I really pushed back. So yeah, I mean, that's huge. And now it's all about, as you have with your kids too. And I'm sure they see it, leading by example, which is huge. And I'm sure, a lot of young women are seeing that in you too, which is why you tell your story, which is phenomenal. It seems like what you just told, like the little trailer, seems like a Netflix movie about to come out.
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy. It's wild.
I know, trust me.
Now I have to read your book.
So I'm only a chapter in the book that comes out today.
Yeah.
It comes out on Kindle today and then hardback and paperback later. In fact, I think I'm going to try and jump on. I have a live book launch today, and I'm going to try to jump on it, but I'm going to be at the airport, so we'll see. But I'm a chapter in there, and I did have to dumb it down a little bit, to protect my family. And so it's a very high level overview of what happened, but I am working on like the whole truth, like those 3 years of my life and the very graphic nitty gritty details of the things I saw. It'll probably be like 5 years before that one comes out. I might do it under a pseudonym. I don't know. But yeah, it's been a journey for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing your story here on our podcast, because even though you've written a book and you talk about this every day, it's never easy to expose those parts of yourself, but it is a necessary part of recovery because it's part of your story. It's part of who you are. And it's an ownership that you should be proud of, which I know sounds so contrary to what most people think, but those experiences are what create this person who is here in front of us and speaking on this podcast. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Especially with women, there are so many women maybe who didn't experience exactly what you did, but have experienced similar situations who never would even consider talking about them or even working on them. Because as women, we are conditioned by society and by those around us to think that, that's just part of what it is. It's hard to be a woman, and childbirth is hard, and we don't get paid enough, and all of these different things. So it is just understood that we should be able to deal with anything that is painful or tough and carry that. when in reality, we have to deal with it just like anyone else does.
Yeah. I was just talking about this.
Yeah, and we are meant, like, society expects us to do all of these things and be very good at them, if not perfect at them. And again, this is a very, very, very terrible analogy to make in comparison to what you just said. But, I used to tell my husband all the time, especially when he was drinking, I'd be like, you go to the grocery store and you take our daughter Lily, who is like a toddler at the time. And it doesn't matter what sort of behavior she has. She could be a perfect angel. She could be a terror pulling everything off of the shelves. And anybody, male or female, walking by is like, he's such a good daddy. Can I help? Offering assistance. I mean, you just show up and they're like, you are such a good daddy. Or like, you will get me something even now, for my birthday. And they're like, oh, that is so sweet. And I just would say, you don't get a fucking cookie for doing the bare minimum expectations.
Yes.
Like, I go to the grocery store with my kid and they're like,
I was going to say,
unruly.
I brought up the grocery store because
Right.
If anyone sees me at the grocery store, it's pretty phenomenal because I've got it down pat now. But because I have a family of 6, I can load up one cart like over the top. But on my way out, it always requires 2 to get to the car. So I have a drill, like I know what to do, but I take my one cart up there. And while I'm in line, I go get my second cart. And then I load both up and I push the front one with one hand and I steer it with my foot, my left foot. And then I pull the second one behind me to the car. And people look at me like I'm crazy, but it's like, this is what a mom of 4 kids has to do. No one's going to help me at the grocery store. My husband helps sometimes, but he's super busy with work. And sometimes I'll bring the kids, but my 6-year-old can't push that cart, But almost every time I go to the grocery store, I've got one pushing and one pulling. But yeah, no one stops me and says like, wow, good job.
No, because I mean, and we all have things like that, right? We're all like, all women are pushing and pulling the carts that are overloaded at the same time. There was one, I cannot remember. It was like a Instagram, maybe I was like doom scrolling one day and I saw whoever was hosting and they had a picture of some celebrity. Again, this was a while ago, so I don't remember the specifics. And they were like, just zoom in on her hands. Look at how many things she's holding. She's holding like 7 things. It was like a coffee and her phone and her keys and a purse or whatever. All these things are like, a man can never. Right.
And an inhaler. Like,
exactly. And it's all of these things. And you're so right. Again, like, your story is definitely not like the grocery store carrying things. But I think that there's a disadvantage there because as soon as you come out of that, it's like, oh, well, that's over. And so you yourself think that too. Like, well, I overcame it and I'm doing well now. So like, I'm good, right? When in reality, that is part of your story. That is part of what will be tethered to you forever. It's not about forgetting it. It's not about locking it away. It is about, and you don't necessarily have to talk about it. That's what you've chosen to do, which I think is great. I'm an open book too. But it's an important part of you. Those scars are important. I always say like scars are sexy in the sense that like we wear them with pride. My mom had a very abusive upbringing. And as we got older, we talk about those things. And she never really got her hands around her mental illness and she passed last year. But that was something, thank you, that was something that she struggled with too. And I remember, and I don't necessarily believe what I'm about to say, but I 100% understand why she taught it to me. She's like, women are one of 2 things. You're either a bitch or a doormat. Which one are you going to be? Because in her mind, that's how it was. And I understand. Again, I think that we've evolved past that.
Right.
But the foundation of what that is.
You're right. Like, not to cut you off, but like,
no, you're good.
If a woman is strong-willed and loud and has an agenda, she's often viewed as a bitch.
Right.
I was just talking about this yesterday. I don't remember with who, but I had gotten upset or something was going on. And we joked that, no offense, but if I was a man, it would have been, I would have sounded strong, but because I was a woman, I sounded slightly hysterical. And that's just the way society is, and I'm not like a huge feminist like by any means. Like, men are amazing. My husband's amazing.
Agreed.
He does a lot of things that I can't do. We always joke about that too, because like I asked him to clean my ceiling fans yesterday. That's not something I'm going to do, but he's very good at that. He's very industrial, and like he's a handyman. He graduated for automotive technology, and now he works in commercial construction. And those are things I know nothing about, so I respect him and everything he does so much. But you're right. The expectations are just so different. I feel like it's changing, though. I do feel like,
Me too.
Just even in the last like year, it's made there's like an awareness of female empowerment, but with the Serena Williams Foundation and the Melinda Gates Foundation. I just read yesterday that Serena Williams is launching a new television docuseries on female CEOs and entrepreneurs. And I was like, yeah, that's part of the movement, but still there's so much room to go. I don't have all my statistics in front of me, but I think it's like 5% of the Fortune 500 companies are female CEOs. That's small, but think of 30 years from now, that could be like 35% or something, so there's definitely room to go. I think every time I look up the statistics, it says something like, to fully close the female gender gap, as far as pay and things like that, it would take like 150 years, but I feel like we're on the track. I feel like it's doable. Like, even at the end of my children's lives, it'll be so much different. And, when my grandchildren are in their 30s, I feel like there will finally be a little bit more of equality going on in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like our daughter's generation and even like the one in between, like us and her, I think that difference is like, she's not afraid to say no. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or no, you can't talk to me that way. And I 100% agree with you that, it's not about men versus women, right? It is about, I always tell people, I'm pro-human, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am
right?
human. I am pro let people make their decisions and live their lives so long as everyone is of consenting age and you're not inflicting harm on other people. Then mind your own damn business.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we talk about these things that are specifically tethered to women, those are just facts, right? Like, it is just a fact that if a woman cries or gets angry, she's going to be seen as hysterical. It is just a fact that women are less likely to be hired in certain jobs because maybe they'll get pregnant. Yeah, anybody could you could get cancer. I mean, I don't want you to. You could fall back off the wagon. Like, but I'm saying, like, and again, horrible comparison, like kids and cancer. That's not what I'm saying. But still, no, I was just saying, you're like,
there was a study done. I just read, or I don't remember where I saw it, but they did like an experiment, and they had two candidates with the exact, or no, that's what it was. They weren't even people. It was two resumes, really good resumes. And all they did was change the names. So one was a female name and one was a male name. And it was at some university. And they gave the class both resumes. And they had to decide who was a good fit and who wasn't. And almost every single person didn't want to hire the resume that was a woman because she was a woman. But everyone was like, oh, I would have hired that guy in a minute. That's a great resume. But just knowing that it was a woman behind the resume made more than half the people not want to hire her, right? Because she would be hysterical and emotional and all those things. But that, for me, when I read that, I was like, wow. Yeah. Because it's the same resume,
Absolutely. And these are things that I agree we're on the right trajectory, because you have to talk about everyone is a little sexist. Even if you are the most like liberal titties out feminist in the world, it is just something that society ingrains in you from birth. Like, there is a part of it that's not of our control, but having these conversations are so important because, again, it's about being pro-human. I joke with him all the time and say things. I'm like, a man could never.
Well, I mean, it's true. Like, men are physically built different. They're stronger. You can't deny that. It's a different build.
But less emotionally stable. That's the one that always gets me, that makes me sound very feminist. But I'm always like, if you look at it historically, men are less emotionally aware and stable than women. And again, the statistics are skewed, right? Because we've only had male leaders and stuff.
Poor
So
Ryan,
you can't really complain.
Oh, I'm used to
are
it.
you kidding? Ryan, he's
we're
so
like
funny.
man bashing, and he's just
And the
sitting there
fun,
listening.
well,
We
and the
love
funny,
you.
no, it's
I
okay.
do.
The
I do
funny
love
thing
you.
is we had a conversation about this yesterday because I actually started the conversation because I was pissed to learn that I have a favorite WNBA player in Dallas, and she just got drafted. And I was actually pissed that her paycheck for a whole year was like one game for a mediocre
Isn't
NBA
that
player.
crazy?
I was pissed about it, and that's kind of how
wild.
we got on this.
He man
story.
bashes more than me. I would
Yeah,
like
I'm
to
pretty
say that.
bad.
I think he's pretty quiet on the podcast, but that's also because he was an athlete. And so like,
Yeah.
I'll never forget, like one of the first times we were talking about him playing hockey, and he was like, if you heard and saw some of the things that dudes do in locker rooms, like
Oh,
he would be
yeah.
like, men
Yeah,
are
it's bad.
disgusting.
Yeah.
And again, women are disgusting too. Like it's we talk about it with men because it's more inflated, but I really had a moment, and I was so proud of our daughter, because I always want to be the person that I'm not like, I don't want to grow into the old lady who's like, unwilling to evolve and change just because I'm so stuck in my ways. And I don't have the best history with men. My mom did not have the best history with men. So in my life, the people I've always been able to trust and learn from are women. And our daughter came to me and she said, Mom, I know that like you have kind of a troubled history with men and you don't trust them. And I get that. She's like, but all of the men in my life are like really awesome. And I love
Aw.
them. And like, when you talk heavily about how much you don't like men, it's like you're talking about my dad or my brother, or like my
Aw.
best friend has two boys and
Yeah.
they're like her brother. She's like, I love the men in my life. I trust them. I feel safe with them. And they're incredible. I haven't had those experiences like you have.
That's amazing.
And this was like
That's
2
so
years
true.
ago. Yeah. So she was like 11 or 12. And, it stopped me in my tracks. And first I felt, I'm so happy that these men in her life are so supportive and safe and amazing, wonderful people. And secondly, I thought, I'm so happy that she feels comfortable coming to me and being like,
Yeah.
don't talk like that about my
Yeah.
dad or my brothers or the men. Like, I love the men in my life. Like, I know that men can be shitty, but I've yet to experience that. And that's another thing. If you flip the coin over as women, like, yes, all of the things we talk about are facts. I mean, you cannot deny them. But then at the same time, she's like, don't project your trauma onto me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I see you. Thank you.
No, I love
Okay.
that. And I mean, there's amazing women and there's women that probably don't have their shit together, but same as like men, there's men that are probably assholes and there's men that are complete gentlemen. And I will say for my husband, he didn't quit drinking until I had been sober a year already, but he's a completely different person. He's always been a good guy and a great father, but it's just more so now. He's just so aware of what me and my children need, mentally and emotionally, versus when we were drinking every day. So I like what she said about the men in her life, because I mean, it just shows that they're doing something right. And that's how I feel about my husband. He's a huge support system for the family. In fact, I'd say one of my daughters is very attached to him and she often just needs a hug. The one that I told you I was in ER the other night, I said to her, like, what helps? Because, we'd already gone down our emergency action plan for her condition and we were kind of at a dead end road at ER. And she said, when I sit with daddy, it helps. When daddy just sits with me and talks to me, it helps. And so I text him right away and I said, hey, when we're home from ER, you're going to need to give some time here. And he said, absolutely. I'll just sit with her. And so, that's so true that, the men are just as important as the women.
Oh,
I like what
absolutely.
you said. It's just human,
Yeah, just pro-human.
human.
Our daughter's the same way. It's funny because she's 14, so she's at that very antagonistic age where It's not so much she wants to cuddle to be sweet. She wants to cuddle, but like kind of be a jerk about
In an
it, you know?
annoying way.
And every night, I say she gets the teenage zoomies where she'll come downstairs and she just blah, 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 and talks and she's being silly. And it's great. Like, it is great. I love her. It's wonderful. But sometimes it can get very annoying, especially when you're like, oh my gosh, okay. I love that you want to share this with me, but like,
I want to go to bed.
And he'll sit on the couch and she'll come and literally sit like right up on him. And he'll look at her and he's like, I love you. Can you back up an inch? And she'll just look at him and go, no. And she'll just get closer and he's just sitting there. And again, it's sweet, but like she knows. Sweet. Yeah, like totally safe. And my mom, because she had such opposite experiences, I was the first one to stay married and have a present father in the family. And she would be like, Lily could seriously go up and punch him in the nuts. And he might get mad, but he's not going to do anything. Like, he's not going to hit her. He's not going to hurt her. I said, no. She goes, he feels really safe. Like, she still, until the day she had, like, she was happy about it, but she couldn't wrap her head around the fact that there was this man who really was harmless. Like, wouldn't harm. And so it's just been a beautiful journey because I identify as a feminist, but in the way that I'm a feminist and I believe that men and women should most complement each other. And I realized in that moment where my daughter was telling me, like, quit talking like shit about men. Like, I love the men in my life, that in surrounding her with these men and having good, healthy relationships, hopefully, I don't have wood to knock on, but hopefully
I'll knock for you.
Right. It'll make her identify not just men, but like untrustworthy people even more. Just she'll be like, that's not how the men in my life ever treated me. And so I'm not accepting that.
Yeah.
Like,
I think what I went through and how you're saying, like, you were, your mom, what she went through and a little different for you. I think we often, when we see how things can be, we try to reverse that for our children. Because just in the life that I lived in those couple years, 20 something years ago, now today I can really read people from those experiences. Like, I can almost, it's weird, I can almost read people better than I want to. But it's those experiences that made me able to do that. And so that's why I wanted my children to have something different in their life than the things I witnessed, And so I think, because my husband, I often joke about how we met, but he's pretty much like the complete opposite of anything I ever had dated. And it's just so weird, because I dated someone most of my life that was completely different than how he was. He was very quiet and very intellectually smart and, quiet, I guess shy is a good way to put it. But I even remember, it's a quick story, but the night I met him was through a mutual friend, and we were all partying, and he was way into me, and he had given me his phone number. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to call this guy. Like, you could not pay me to call this guy. Like, complete opposite of anything I'd ever been interested in. But the universe is crazy, right? And that night I ended up being in a pretty sticky situation that I needed out of. And I got into a place where I was like fight or flight. I had to get out of there. And I was rifling through my purse, and I found his phone number later that same night. And I called him, and I was like, hey, do you have a car? I need to get out of here right now. Like, in the next 30 seconds, I need out of this place. And he came and picked me up. And here we are 26 years later with 4 kids. But I had, in that first instance of meeting him, but it's so crazy because after everything I learned and observed and the type of people I witnessed, I was able to see what a good egg he was and know after years of dating him that that's the type of person I want to be the father of my children. Not exactly what I was originally attracted to at 16, 17. I was very attracted to like a bad boy, like what's his name? Dylan and Brandon or whatever from 90210 I'm going to age.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
But yeah, the universe just put something very different in my path, and I was able to recognize how different it was. And after years of dating, see that, this is the kind of dad I want around my kids.
Yeah. Very quick funny story. But when we first started dating, I had an ex who was still kind of hung up on me, and he was, for lack of a better word, thug living a bad life, just like all of the wrong things, which is probably why I found it thrilling. And he would like call, I mean, he was harmless really, but he would like call and say dumb things. And I remember, I think when we first started down, like, he is going to break up with me because he's going to be like, what sort of like trashy world?
Yeah.
But what were you doing? He said that he was like, who the fuck is this guy? And I was like, he goes, you dated him? I was like, I'm not talking about it. He's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
We've
oh
all
my
been
gosh.
there.
I'm like, but yeah, it's that girl mentality of, ooh, this is scary, so it's fun,
Very
you know,
exciting,
like
thrilling. Yeah. But then,
but
the older
now
you realize you want a gentleman.
I'm like, I like boring now. That's what I tell people. They're like, how's it going? I'm like, my life is beautifully boring.
Yeah.
Like, and when I say that, like, I'm always busy. There's always stuff going on, but it's nothing
no
worth
drama.
talking about because it's just boring. And I fucking love it.
I love it. I love it so much.
Before we get you out of here, I definitely want you to plug your book again, by the way, which comes out today, which is awesome. But I always ask all of my guests one question at the end of all of our podcasts. And it just going back into your drinking days, you got to give us some kind of funny story that could involve you, could involve a friend, could involve your husband. And if there's pee involved, it makes it even better.
And we found that drunk people pee on strange things.
I don't know if I'd have to think really back hard.
It could be a friend who did something funny.
Something funny from drinking days. Gosh, I was just.
Or even just wild days, like something that you're like, I can't fucking believe I did that.
Oh, I've got a good one. There was a club here in town years ago, and I did Jello wrestling.
Yes.
I still have photos of it.
That's amazing.
Oh gosh, you have to send them privately to me.
I look hard. They're somewhere in my belongings, but I do remember, like, someone said to me, "We're short a girl. We need a girl. Can you be here tonight?" And I said, doing it.
Oh my god!
And we had to wear bikinis, and it was red Jello. It was in a wrestling pit, in the middle of a nightclub, and it was this huge thing. But I do remember I was very flexible from gymnastics, but I think I was set up because the woman that they paired me with was like the strongest. I mean, she had been training for this, and here I was, like, on drugs, drinking, just thinking, oh, I'll go have a good time, because they were short a person. Like, she was in it to win it. Like,
this was her World Series.
Yeah, I regretted it the second I saw her. She was like cracking her knuckles and like staring me down.
Like, I thought this was just
been
fun.
Training for this her whole life, and you were on the train tracks.
She's like, this girl's gonna beat my ass.
Mm-hmm. And she did. But I was so flexible, and the Jello was so slimy that I remember I was able to, like, maneuver my arms, and, like, I would put my toes up over my head and, like, slide out of her hold, and I was constantly sliding around. But she started to get mean, and she had acrylic fingernails.
Oh no.
And so when this thing wrapped and we toweled ourselves off and the lights came on, she had scratched the shit out of me, and it was red Jello, and so the Jello dye had gone into all the scratches.
Oh
I looked like I'd gone through a wood chipper. People were so sad for me. They were like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "Really, it's not that bad. It's the Jello dye."
Yeah.
And you're drinking at the time, so you're like, "Oh my God, it hurts so bad. Everybody should buy me drinks."
Right? Yeah. That's definitely one. Yeah,
wow.
But that's probably.
That's a good one.
That is good.
That was before I had children. Yeah.
I mean, one day when you're like 70 or 80 years old, I say that you reenact it, bikini and all. I mean, I think of like the movie Old School with like Blue dying from a heart attack in the middle of like the Jello pool.
It was just like that too.
Yeah.
Oh,
I love it. That's amazing.
About that. That's so funny. What a memory.
Well, Marissa, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Fantastic.
It was great. It was a lot of fun. Exceeded all expectations.
So tell us about your book one more time, where you can get it, name and everything.
So it's I'm just a co-author. I should say not just. I'm a co-author. There we go.
There you go.
And a fabulous gentleman named Marco Robinson. He's put out 2 movies on Netflix. He's a producer for Netflix. He's a Channel 4 TV host in the UK. His television show is called Get a House for Free. He gives away free houses. He's a philanthropist. He does amazing work. He's been a bestseller. He actually created this movement, and he sought out people that have an incredible life-changing story of completely turning their life around. And each chapter is a different person's real story. And then at the end of the chapter, you have a QR code to access them and get their workbooks and connect with them on a personal level. And so I believe there's 15 books total. There might be more. Volume 1 came out already last month, and it skyrocketed to #1 in the UK and the US. And then today, but I've been getting a lot of messages. I think we're waiting on Amazon to push through. At 1:00 today, we should be launching Volume 2 on Kindle, or the Kindle version on Amazon. And then the hard copy and the paperback generally follows in the next week or 2. But yeah, it's called Start Over. Turning any loss into a sensational comeback. And again, it'll be on Amazon. And you can just look up Start Over. If you look up Marco Robinson, it comes up a lot easier because he's got such a following. But he's great. I mean, I was just talking to him this morning. I don't know how he has enough time because there's, hundreds and hundreds of authors that he's working with, because we've already got like all the way to book 6, I think, in pre-production. Like they're working on it. And there's like 10 group chats, there's Zooms and meetings and stuff every single day. But the nicest thing is if I send him a direct message personally, I mean, he responds instantly. So for me, that's amazing considering how many, things he's juggling and everything he's doing. But the movement's getting huge, and it's so amazing because it's connecting all of us. I've made so many friends from meeting the authors. I've probably got like 200 more Facebook friends that are the authors of this book. And there's a live book tour. I'm a little bit too busy to be a part of that because, again, I have a day job. But they just wrapped up their live book tour in London in June. They're in Dublin, and then they go to Sweden. They're doing Florida. But he's all over the place doing these live book tours. And any author that wants to be a part of it can come tell their story on stage. I don't have the capacity right now because I have so much going on, but he's phenomenal. So it's called Start Over by Marco Robinson and 14 other remarkable authors.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Well, Marissa, thank you so much. And we'll get the link actually for those listening, watching the podcast, and we'll actually put that out with reels and everything that we do with you as well. So
awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. This was so fun. I've never done one with 2 people, I don't think. I'm trying to think, but I think this is the first time where I had a husband and wife duo, and this dynamic was so much fun. I have to tell you guys, it just adds a little extra like sprinkle of fairy dust to the whole experience. It was really fun to talk to both of you at the same time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was great.
We kind of like each other. Yeah. It's all right.
Thank you, Marissa, so much. We'll talk soon.
Have a good day, you guys. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. If you love the podcast, which I know you do, please like, subscribe,
and hit that notification bell to get notified every time we post.
That's right. Dropping them, baby.